This episode of the podcast is supported by Loon's Nest Coffee. They are closed for the season up the Gunflint Trail until late May 2026. You can still, of course, though, order coffee at loonsnest.coffee. You can get merchandise coffee there, have it shipped to the house. Bob and the crew from Loon's Nest also want you to know they will be back at Canoe in Madison, Wisconsin, 2026. I know Bob was there in 2025 handing out coffee to people, talking about the beans and the roasting process. Loon's Nest Coffee, located up the Gunflint Trail, but right now, over the winter and into the early spring, you want to be ordering from the website, loonsnest.coffee. Appreciate Bob and all the support, and my goodness, are we excited for our cardamom roll come next May. It's a news track, it's a short track, it's a news track.
That's our new jingle, welcoming you to the Paddle and Portage Podcast News Track. We got some updates for you, things that are happening that are particularly relevant to this time and place. I'm sitting with Joe Friedrichs. You may recognize his voice from our jingle that you heard at the top of the episode.
It's a news track, it's a short track, it's a news track.
Trying to turn that volume down. Joe Friedrichs, what are our top headlines for this news track today?
Well, early January and lake trout are on a lot of people's mind across the Boundary Waters Canoe area.
You mean your mind?
And a lot of people's
Yeah.
across the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. Had a very interesting discussion with E.J. Isaac, who is the Grand Marais Area Fisheries Supervisor. Been on the podcast multiple times, talking about lake trout seasons and bag limits, which is how many fish you can keep. And
Do you actually put them in a bag?
it's an old school, like how they call it, a creel survey. Just these old school names that get handed down and are completely irrelevant to modern times.
Yeah, sorry I derailed the... Go ahead.
But nonetheless, there is a season specific for lakes entirely within the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness that starts on January 1st. Now that's the start date every year. And it has to be entirely within. So we're talking about Duncan, South, Tuscarora, Basswood, Trout Lake over on the Ely side, Knife.
Alton, Crystal.
Mm-hmm. Those lakes. Lakes that are partially in, Sag, Seagull, these types of lakes, those don't start until the 2 weeks after, basically, the Saturday 2 weeks after. This year it's like the 17th or the 18th of January. So there's this gap in between. Some people don't mind it. Other people, it pisses them off. Some people are a little more neutral on the whole thing, like us.
Yeah, like we know where to go and when, and we've got our rhythms.
Mm-hmm. The Canadian side of SAG, though, starts on January 1. So a lot of these, like, well, this lake, you can fish it on this side here and not until this date. It's generally, I can understand why it annoys some people. And it wasn't always this way. I was talking with Darren Fagerman, who owns a piece of property on the Canadian side of Saginaw at the end of the Gunflint Trail, who used to be a conservation officer for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. He's retired now. And he said, I remember there was a time when they just started on January 1, inside or outside. It didn't matter. And then it just kind of like almost maybe even he thought accidentally or mistakenly was like, wait, we got these pre-seasons, or it was to try to encourage people to get into the Boundary Waters lakes. It didn't really take much of a foothold, though, and it's just kind of become this like accepted, well, nobody really knows why it is this way, it just is this way. But there's discussions taking place at upper management in the DNR, the area fisheries supervisor, people like EJ over at the Tower office, Finland office, even down toward Grand Rapids and other areas. Like about a dozen people, EJ told me, having this discussion of, should we just start them all on January 1? And they're sorting that out. This is far from some sort of official change or even policy. There's different steps it would have to go through before that even happens. There's not even a chance yet for public input on this because they're not that close yet. But it's being discussed to the point where EJ was comfortable to tell me, with my reporter hat on, yeah, we're having this discussion. So it's noteworthy. It's newsworthy. I think that a lot of people would support it. I actually told Darren, you know what, Darren, he's very passionate about this, by the way, Darren Fagerman. I said, Darren.
Passionate in support of?
In support that all the lakes should start January 1. And I said, I'm on board with that too. If you want somebody to write a letter to send it to the DNR or down to the legislature if it needs to be worked through that way, I'm happy to either write it or co-author it or do whatever. So we'll keep following this story very, very closely, definitely. And it sounds like there is ongoing discussion about it. We'll keep you informed. Do have an article about it too. It'll be on the Paddle and Portage website, paddleandportage.com, if you want to get a little more of the background of these dates. You know, when we're talking about ice fishing and lake trout, it's a pretty narrow scope of people, right? This doesn't appeal to everybody, but for those who does, it's kind of like the RABC thing. For those people that are impacted by these things, it's a huge thing. And so that's who we're talking to largely about today.
All right. So there's news, and there will be more news, and still probably more news on this topic to come. Mm-hmm. What else we got?
Well, here's some sad, happy combo news.
Oh, I think I know what's coming.
Aaron Kania, the Kawishiwi District Ranger, who we've heard from on the podcast numerous times in the past few years, is now officially retired. He arrived to Superior National Forest in the Ely Ranger Station in 2020, and he retired December 31st, 2025. He's a younger guy, LB. He's like 50 years old. And so it's like retirement. When I first heard he was retiring, I was like, what do you mean you're retiring? Like, we talked to you about prescribed fire, and he was at this Aldo Leopold thing that we went to at the Ely College. And
yeah, if you want to reference, there's a nice little reel about that featuring Aaron on our Instagram, Paddle and Portage Instagram. Go check it out if you want to see this influential individual's face talking to you.
Right, and we've got him on the YouTube channel from last summer. We recorded something out in the woods where Aaron and I were talking about prescribed fire and
That's right.
fire activity and stuff. So to say that he's like been an important source of information about what happens in the Boundary Waters is kind of like an understatement. I mean, he's right up there with Tom Hall and other people that we talked to.
And it's not just his role in the Forest Service and his knowledge, but he's a genuinely good human with a passionate love for place.
He's a very enthusiastic about the Boundary Waters and just forest management, particularly when you look at it through the lens of fire and so forth. So I had a chance to catch up with Aaron, talked with him just right after the retirement, so just in the past couple of days. As I said, his first day retired is New Year's Day 2026, so this is all very recent news. Here's part of my conversation with Aaron Kania, the now retired Kawishiwi District Ranger. The news of the day is that you've retired. I'm wondering just up front, what led to the decision, and tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. This is something that was planned. So at the end of 2025, I was able to retire, and kind of been a long time in the making. I started out a while back, but I was in the law enforcement field and federal law enforcement officer, and there's a 20-year retirement program and age 50. And so in 2025, I turned 50. I was eligible to retire. My kids are out of the house and in college, and I figure no time like the present to head out the door. Winter's a great time to retire as well. Things are a little slower on the forest. It gives us a chance to make a transition so that the forest is covered during a slow time of the year, because the worst time of year is to, come into the job in the middle of the permit season, or when the Boundary Waters is full and fires are underway.
All right. Okay. I mean, so just to be clear too for our listeners of the podcast, is that you've been on here multiple times over the years, and we've talked at some of the open houses that I know were an important thing for you at the Ranger Station in Ely every spring. We've talked about a permit fee, proposed increases, wildfire things. We did a
We had a conversation at the Aldo Leopold Foundation, that meeting at the college in Ely, about the past, the present, the future of the Boundary Waters. So our listeners are definitely familiar with information that you've shared with us over the years, and beyond that scope too, from Boyce Fort to Ely to Tofty, Grand Marais, Grand Portage, Gunflint. I mean, you are very well known across Superior National Forest. And so this is a big deal that you're retiring, quite frankly. What are some things that stand out for you professionally, personally, that you're most proud of, or that really highlight the work that's taken place on Superior National Forest since you've been here?
Yeah, Joe, I really appreciate the time that we have had together, because you do reach an audience that's in love with the Boundary Waters, that uses the Boundary Waters, experiences it, and even the area around the Boundary Waters, these gateway communities and the general forest. And I think that's really important, as a district ranger, that we're not working in a vacuum, that we fully recognize the decisions we make, the things we do have ramifications, and to be able to communicate that with a much wider audience is tremendous. And you kind of brought that new technology out there with podcasts. I think you were one of the first folks in the podcast world, and so it was able to reach a different audience that we don't always reach through other forms of media. When I first got here, we had like maybe 4,000, 5,000 followers on social media, on Facebook in particular. And, it became really apparent quickly that we needed to grow that. When we had fires in the Boundary Waters, or there's changes that occur, even something as simple as a bear, there'd be a bear on a portage or a campsite, and we needed to get that word out. And, society uses social media. And so we really grew our social media presence. I think we got in the high 30s now, like maybe 38,000. And that's just been a tremendous tool to get the word out. So yeah, a lot happens. I came in May of 2020. That was the COVID times. It was kind of a slow fire season that year, but with COVID.
Right. I mean, that time frame, when we look back, and I know that jumps right into my mind because I've talked about it during some of the presentations for Last Entry Point, was COVID murdered George Floyd in Minneapolis, and just a lot of unrest. There was a young man that died right around Memorial Day weekend from Indiana up on Tuscarora Lake, and that's kind of that catalyst for the book Last Entry Point. And so I just talk about that specific time as like a monumental time for a lot of people's lives. I mean, just the unrest of that, societal unrest of that time. And for you to come onto this very prominent national forest. I mean, Superior National Forest, and this is not a knock against other places, even here in Minnesota or other states, but this is like a big deal forest nationally, with the Boundary Waters and just all the things about Superior National Forest that make it so complex and so captivating for people.
Exactly. And that's what I was motivated to apply for this job. It was always on my radar. I came up here as a tourist. I did a lot of trips in the Boundary Waters. I lived out west. I was in southern Utah before I came here, in Wyoming, but I still found time, particularly in the middle of summer when it's hot in southern Utah. And it was great to come to the Boundary Waters, and it was a lot of water, a lot of greenery, go swimming, a lot of fishing. And so I knew what I was getting into, and I knew the reputation and a lot of the background. I had worked with the Bureau of Land Management before this, and I'd actually worked in Washington, D.C. for a time. And so I was really familiar with some of the hot topics that happen here, in particular mining, and was very familiar with those. So it's not like I didn't know what I was getting into. And then with that law enforcement background, kind of the pace and tempo that I'm used to working, I just fell right into it. And that was kind of my norm. I'm used to working at that scale, at that complexity level, and then just a really good team here. So, the employees that are superior are truly superior. And they just accepted me, showed me around, taught me what I needed to know, introduced me to a lot of folks. And that really eased that transition into it. during a very busy time. A lot of change, a lot of chaos, you could say. And I think we navigated through that best we were able, but I was just really grateful for the community accepting me, and then the employees here, just showing me what it is that they expect from a ranger, and what that ranger needs to know to make good decisions.
Wow. One thing I mentioned that we've talked about in a video podcast that we did outside the ranger station last summer was about fire and prescribed fire, the necessity of it in places like the boreal forest, the boundary waters. And I'm just wondering if that's something that stands out to you as an accomplishment or just something of importance now that you've retired, about fire implementation, fire policy on Superior National Forest, or any thoughts you have about that topic in general.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I think you nailed it, because coming in, I had a lot of background in fire, even though I was in law enforcement. When you work in a land management agency, you work with fire, you work with incident management teams, large fires. And so I was comfortable in the fire world, but as a leader in a community, really recognizing how fire can impact and affect a community at that level, and being able to come in, working with the team we have here. I was really grateful for open reception by the mayor of Ely at the time, and what we were able to accomplish. So some of the first things was, like I said, build on our social media, how we interact with the public and with the media to get the word out during those fire incidents. Really set the stage for 2021. That was a tremendous fire year. And I think we ended up being pretty successful with a lot of fire on the ground. The impacts that had on the boundary waters, we did end up closing the boundary waters that year. There was closures all over the place, and just being able to communicate what we were doing, why we were doing it, what the fires were doing, why this was important, that went a long way. And then, we were also able to build up our prescribed fire program, implement some pretty significant prescribed fires, some of which were in the boundary waters or on the boundary waters north of Ely, and then working through the Fernberg project, which has quite a bit of prescribed fire in it, along that Fernberg corridor east of Ely. And I think over time, as that's implemented, people are really going to see how that reduces the wildfire risk to our communities. So, and maybe one last thought of that is during the same time, we were able to complete a memorandum of understanding with the Ojibwe and the Bois Forte, Grand Portage, Fond du Lac in 1854. And what that really did is opened up that line of communication and hear the concerns and desires of, the Ojibwe people and what they were wanting. This is the 1854 treaty area. They do have treaty rights, and how our management decisions, whether it's fire or other things, could impact those rights and their ability to hunt, fish, and gather. So I think, there was a lot that went into that over the 5 years. That probably did rise to one of the top things I worked on and was able to influence and move forward.
When I've met you and introduced you on the podcast, and particularly the video side of things, our viewers in that case are probably wondering, well, he didn't seem like he was like a very old fella, 50 years old, and just like you don't look old, because you aren't, quite frankly. And so there's probably a next chapter for you somewhere. Will that be in northern Minnesota? And what's next for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is funny when you reflect back. So I got into my federal career right out of college. So I was 22 years old and started my career. So I ended up with 28 plus years serving my country. And so 50 years old, I have an extensive resume. We love it up here. I think there's so much to do up here. I have a lot of options on the table that I'm working through, thinking through. And so my first goal is to actually spend some time ice fishing. So I look forward to when you and I have that chance to go ice fishing. We can talk more then. But, really there's like spending time in the ice house and, contemplating the universe for a while and just kind of letting the dust settle a little bit. I was really focused on finishing strong and then just kind of parked a whole bunch of ideas. And I just want to sit in the ice house and kind of sort through it and really just see where the dust settles.
Okay, fair enough. Well, like you said, we'll definitely look forward to catching up more in person over the winter and the months ahead, and maybe you'll have a clearer picture about what it is that's coming next as you contemplate these things. And in the ice shack, certainly, I know that's where I've done some of my best thinking over the years, is out in the Boundary Waters or Superior National Forest. Even on some solo trips, really, that's where things can settle and resonate about our futures and so forth. I appreciate all the information, Aaron. I mean, I just can't express enough gratitude to you to convey how important some of those things have been in those open houses at the ranger station there in Ely, and seeing the turnout there over the years has just been tremendous. I mean, it's a very engaged community, obviously, when we're talking about the Boundary Waters in particular, and people show up, and you and Tom Hall and others, Kathy Quinn, were there to listen, and those were even when things got the pressure in the room raises a bit sometimes on some of those issues, it was always seemed to be through a lens of open dialogue, and communication seemed an important thing for you during your tenure at the ranger station, and that helped us get some of that information to the public via the podcast. So on behalf of everybody here, thank you, Aaron, for your service to the ranger station and for your commitment to Superior National Forest.
Yeah, thank you, and looking forward to staying in touch and having more conversations. I'm definitely going to be spending time in the Boundary Waters and forest around here, so we're going to have a lot to talk about, Joe.
Wow, thanks, Aaron, for sharing that, and thanks, Joe, for tracking Aaron down and talking to him. You're right. What you said at the beginning is sort of bitter and sweet, and I'm excited for what's in the future for Aaron and how we may get tangled up in it, of course.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some plans to get out on the ice. I would say that's hopefully going to happen this winter, but Aaron's busy. We'll be running all over 2LB, but I'm sure we can make it happen, even if that involves like fishing up on the Canadian side in April or some version.
That means you'll be leaving me behind.
No RABC for the LB.
I've been suffering from that little lapse of timing for a long time now.
Speaking of, we do have a conclusion of sorts posted. We haven't talked about it on the podcast yet, but RABCs will be continued until September, about mid-September in their current form. Auto renews again, and then after that, there's going to be a telephone-based check-in system. We're still figuring out exactly what that's going to look like, but cell phones will be a part of that, which I think is encouraging for a lot of people to hear. Certainly the people at Quetico who relied on those southerly entrances and saw that dramatic decline, and some of the outfitters and people like Darren Fagerman who go to their cabin on the Canadian side of SAG. So a lot more to be figured out between now and September when it comes to crossing the border of the bound international line of these border lakes, but we'll be on top of it.
And potentially some good news, subjectively from my perspective, that there will be an opportunity again someday to go visit the Cache Bay Ranger Station and actually go with you up to visit Darren Fagerman. And for all of us who, may not be in that proverbial boat like you are at the moment of auto renewal. So thanks for all the work you've been doing to give us some answers on that. It's nice to at least know the trajectory of things. And that's the kind of stuff that you, our listeners, and really me, because I'm learning a lot of this right with you from Joe Friedrichs on these news updates. Stay tuned, because we'll keep it coming.
That's right. That's what we do here at Paddle and Portage. Thanks for all the support. I had a swelling of support through the holiday season for people subscribing to the platform. Thank you to everybody that did that, all the people that are renewing their memberships too here. Like, this is about when we started the company a few years back. And so,
can you believe it?
So, right out here in the Writer's Shack, LB.
It's just incredible. When we're mentioning season 3, it's like, whoa, wow. That's its own little milestone, considering the years we've been sharing stories about the Boundary Waters, and now really the groundswell of support on the Paddle and Portage platform. It makes me a little emotional in these darker days around the solstice, thinking about that love and support from you all.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you too, of course, to our sponsors who have helped us get here on the podcast. And you hear about them, and when you do, please check them out. Their lodge or resort or rent from them or get their gear, whatever it is, that they help make this podcast possible, as well as everybody who subscribes to paddleandportage.com. It all goes into making all of this happen, the journalism and the podcast and the news.
And the cool videos, too, on YouTube. Man, that's been a whole new thing that's just really been cool.
It's been fantastic. So Paddle and Portage YouTube, you're doing most of or all of those videos on there, LB. The produced ones certainly are in your hands and your creative fingertips. And so we'll just keep rolling here into the new year and keep dropping short tracks. It's a news track. It's a short track.
God, we're good.